Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. We're returning to the productions of, episode for this Verano 1711 podcast. And what a good way to resume the process with an excellent guest. But before we go to him, I just want to say hi to my buddies here, my co-host, theologian Luis Alberto Joel from Australia. How you doing today, sir?
Good, thank you. Very early morning, but also very nice morning because the sun was up around 5:30 in the morning. So I opened my eyes because we're in summer here. So and it's very hot too, very hot night. But it's good. It's very good to be here.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it. All right, good. So now, Matias coming all the way from Russia, the coolest place. No, it's not the
Right.
coldest place, but it's just nearly there. How are you doing today, Matias?
I'm fine. Actually, have the opposite experience. Now the day is very short here, but we
Mm.
get to see the northern lights from time to time, so
Mm.
that's nice.
Beautiful.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I can be counted among those people who have never ever in life seen those lights. So probably I've been gone. I've been gone from this world. I wouldn't have the chance to see them. Professor VanderKam, have you seen those lights, northern lights?
Not very well. Not very well. They're visible from this area.
Mm. Okay. Here
Yes.
from
So
Tasmania, Tasmania is the place that you go if you want to go and see them.
Oh, uh-huh.
okay, people. So now you can hear and listen to our guest, Professor James C. VanderKam, joining us today, returning to our podcast. He's no stranger to this platform, and today we're bringing with a very specific, a topic that, we had Professor Florentino Garcia Martinez on the show a couple of months ago, and when we brought the calendar topic up, he said you need to go with VanderKam. He's the calendar guy.
Mm.
Yeah, he's the expert on the calendars, and I know Matias. He's been doing a lot of work due to his thesis. So this is our cup of tea. So Professor VanderKam, just for anybody out there who doesn't know who you are, just give us a little bit of your background, who you are, where you studied, everything.
Okay, thank you. Well, as you can tell from my surname, I come from Dutch ancestry, and
Yeah.
my family settled in the state of Michigan. And so my early schooling was there. For college, I went to Calvin College, and for seminary to Calvin Theological Seminary in Grand Rapids, Michigan. As the name indicates, they're Calvinist schools, and that's the tradition of my family. When I was in the seminary, I found that even though I had originally thought I would become a pastor, I became very
Sure.
interested in early Judaism. And I didn't know a lot about it at the time, but I wanted to study more about it. It seemed like it had great possibilities. I was fortunate enough to have a Fulbright scholarship after I graduated from seminary to go to St. Andrews, Scotland.
Hmm.
And there I studied with Matthew Black and some of the
Mm.
other faculty
Mhm.
members. I studied especially Aramaic and was quite interested in the book of Enoc at the time.
Mm,
And
yeah.
obviously Aramaic was very important for that. I took a seminar with Matthew Black and wrote a paper for it, and it became my first publication. It was published in Vetus Testamentum at the suggestion of Matthew Black, a study of the theophany passage in 1 Enoch 1. But by that time, I had already been accepted at Harvard for a doctoral program. So I spent the next 4 years at Harvard studying with Frank Cross and John Strugnell, Thomas Lambden, Paul Hansen, and some other people. It was a great place to be, and I think I was already interested in the Book of Jubilees then, but became much more interested in it the more I got to know about it, and eventually decided to do a dissertation on the Book of Jubilees. And some of the fragments in Hebrew of the text of Jubilees had been published by that time, not many of them, but some of them. So I worked on them and some other topics in connection with the Book of Jubilees, and wrote a dissertation that was finished and defended in 1976 and published in 1977 as Textual and Historical Studies in the Book of Jubilees. I was fortunate at a time when there were very few teaching positions available to have one at North Carolina State University, where I taught for the first 15 years of my career. At that time, I taught only undergraduate students, no graduate students in the religion program there. But at that time, during that time, I wrote a book about Enoc traditions, Enoc and the growth of an apocalyptic tradition, and later on published my edition of the Book of Jubilees, the Ethiopic Book of Jubilees, and translation and notes on it. In 1991, I was invited to join the faculty at the University of Notre Dame and spent the final 25 years of my teaching career at Notre Dame, teaching undergraduate and graduate students. And while I had still been at North Carolina State University, I had been appointed to the committee that was charged with publishing the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I had gone to meet J.T. Millick, the almost legendary scholar of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and had talked to him in Paris. And he had given me his notes on the remaining unpublished fragments of Jubilees in Hebrew and invited me to publish them. So he and I worked together in publishing them for some time. But at Notre Dame, I continued work on the scrolls, and eventually at Notre Dame, along with my colleague Eugene Ulrich, we edited and published quite a large number of volumes that are included in the Discoveries in the Judean Desert series. In 2016, I retired, and a few years later, my wife and I moved to Princeton, New Jersey, where we now live. We moved here because our children and grandchildren are in this general part of the country, and it's really been very nice to be closer to them, even though we miss being at Notre Dame. So why don't I leave it at that as an introduction?
Well, we want you to go for forever because we just want to know more about your biography. I was checking in some of your books. I understand you did some work on Ge'ez. Is that the way you say it? Ge'ez?
Yes.
On the Book of Jubilees?
Yes.
Right? And you published a critical edition on the Book of Jubilees. That was a while ago.
Yeah.
That was a while ago.
That was
one of the first. Yeah.
That was published in 1989. I had spent much of the years in the early 1980s working on that edition. It took a lot of time to compare the many manuscripts I was dealing with and to record the variant readings and things of that sort and comment on textual notes. But I had studied Ge'ez, the classical language of Ethiopia, when I was at Harvard. Thomas Lambden, who wrote a grammar of Ge'ez, was my teacher. And obviously that has been a very helpful tool because the complete texts of Enoc and Jubilees are preserved in that language.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that, Professor VanderKam. So, guys, any comments so far? I mean, as I'm telling you, this is impressive, and we can go on forever here.
It's very amazing that you're mentioning all the people that I read the books, like Thomas Lambden. I have his book, his green book. I also use it as a reference for Hebrew grammar and the other names that you mentioned as well. But also, Professor, you have been you're much read. Your book on early Judaism was much anticipated in the Spanish-speaking world, and it sold out. It came out and it sold out immediately. So hopefully this type of interviews also encourage other publishing houses to continue publishing your work, which is so much needed for us in the Spanish-speaking world. Although I speak English, I mean, I'm in Australia. I grew up in USA. I grew up in California, but I would love for the Spanish-speaking people to be able to have access to this type of information, to this type of studies. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Incidentally, it was wonderful to study with Thomas Lambden. I don't know how many languages he knew. He knew so many of them and had written grammars on Hebrew, on Gez, on Coptic, perhaps others that I'm not aware of, but that's what he loved to do. And he was really a very good teacher. I really enjoyed studying with him.
But I just want to emphasize this point because I mean, Harvard, here we have this understanding, and probably is the same in the States, but it's the highest of the high, in terms of educational. So before we can go into the question, I just want to ask you this, Professor VanderKam, how was the first impression when you got noticed that you will be received in Harvard to study there? I mean, what was the experience like?
Yeah. Harvard was where I really wanted to study because of the faculty there. So I was delighted when they invited me to come to Harvard to do doctoral work. But at the same time as I was accepted at Harvard, I was offered the Fulbright scholarship that I mentioned, scholarship that was especially for people who wanted to study in another country at another university. And Harvard was kind enough to say that they would delay my admission for 1 year so that I could take advantage of the Fulbright scholarship and then begin my doctoral work the year after that. So that was a very good arrangement. But I have to say, when I was at St. Andrews during that Fulbright year, I wrote to Harvard just to make sure that we all had our information straight and that I had already been given admission. And someone at Harvard wrote back to me saying they had no record of my being admitted. And I don't know what happened, but something must have gotten lost. Anyway, it took quite a bit of correspondence to straighten that out. And eventually it was all straightened out very well, but that was a little nerve-wracking to find that out. And this was
I can only imagine.
This was in 1971. So of course we didn't have computers and email and things like that.
Yeah.
So it was all mail, snail mail, slow mail. But eventually I'm happy to say it worked out well.
Thank you. Guys, any comments before we can go into the questions here?
No.
Okay, let's do it. So let's go with the questions, Professor VanderKam. By way of introduction, could you talk about biblical and post-biblical calendars and some prominent examples of how the Dead Sea Scrolls deal with these texts in the Hebrew Bible, e.g., creation account, the flood, and so forth?
Okay. Let me say first that if I was called a calendar guy, it's not because I have a technical knowledge about astronomy and things of that sort. I have studied astronomy a little bit, but certainly not in any depth. But I've been interested in these texts that convey knowledge about calendars to us and how people calculated time in different periods. Obviously, the Hebrew Bible, the Bible was a major source for the people who wrote the various kinds of Dead Sea Scrolls. And you have to admit that the literature we have in the Bible was not written in order to convey calendar information. It mentions calendar information, but it mentions it by the way, not as usually a chief topic or anything like that. So that learning anything about calendars and calculation of time from the Bible is pulling together different bits and pieces of information and trying to conclude from them what these people do. How did they organize time? How did they measure it and things like that? When you think about the few passages in the Bible that make references to time, the story of the creation in Genesis 1 does stand out in that it is organized according to the structure of a 7-day week, and mentions each of the days and talks about what was created on them, as we all know. But one little item that we may be talking about later on that came up is that when it's talking about each day of creation, the creation account says that it was evening, it was morning, the first day, or the third day, or the fourth day, or whatever. And we can at least ask, is that order of words, evening and morning, significant? Does it tell us that whoever wrote Genesis 1 thought the day, in the sense of a period of 24 hours, began in the evening and concluded in the morning, the next, after the sun rose, and so on? Or was that just a way of speaking that didn't really have any particular significance like that? But at least the 7-day structure of the week was obviously important in any Jewish calendrical text after that. This was established in Genesis 1. But the flood story, you might think, would be helpful for calendar issues. There seem to be two versions of the flood in Genesis 6 through 9. But in this passage, in this section, there are more references to months and dates in months, and actually to year numbers than we're accustomed to finding in biblical texts. So the flood is dated according to the year in Noah's life, the year 600 and the year 601 of his life. So the story of the flood, the stories of the flood, seem to be talking about something that happened over the period of a year, approximately. And we have references to the second month and the date in the month on which the flood began. We have references to 40 days of rain, 40 days and 40 nights. Incidentally, we could take note of the order of words there too, day and night, just the opposite of what we have in Genesis 1. Events in the seventh month, and then especially the first month of the next year, second month. And one could maybe calculate from the flood story how long the flood took. Could count it in different ways, but there are a lot of pieces of information there that might contribute to a story to a calendar calculation. Another area in the Hebrew Bible that could be important for calendar purposes would be the lists of festivals that we have in Leviticus 23 and Numbers 28 and 29, because the festivals are dated precisely in those passages to the month and to the date or dates over which the festival is celebrated. And in those lists, of course, the listing of festivals begins with Passover, so it begins in the springtime of the year and goes on from there, numbering the months from that point. So those are some of the significant passages in the Hebrew Bible. Another passage that proved important later on for talking about larger units of time was Jeremiah's prophecy about Babylon being in control and Jerusalem lying in ruins for 70 years, which, of course, people have related to the time between the destruction of the first temple and the completion of the second one. And it's a number that's reflected in the prophecy of Zechariah. And we also have it referred to at the end of Second Chronicles. But the more interesting passage referring to it is Daniel chapter 9, where Daniel is studying the books, we're told, the plural books, but he's dealing with the 70 years that found in the book of Jeremiah, in Jeremiah 25 and 29. And Daniel is told by revelation from an angel, of course, that the 70 years are really 70 weeks of years. So that you would have to say that it would be 490 years that Jeremiah was actually talking about if we had the true understanding of what that number in Jeremiah meant. I think what's happening here is that in Daniel 9, we have the information taken from the book of Leviticus, Leviticus 25, 26, that the Lord will punish his people with exile, if they have been sinful, and that the punishment will be made sevenfold if they do not repent after being punished. And it seems as though in Daniel 9, that's the understanding that the angel conveys, that Israel has not been repentant. And so the 7 times principle from the book of Leviticus is applied to Jeremiah's 70 years. So it's that punishment has to be multiplied 7 times. So we have a concern with a larger unit of time here in Daniel 9, and something that was taken up by later writers. And I guess one other thing I could mention briefly and then stop talking about this, but the reigns of kings, the reigns of kings in the book of Kings, and somewhat reflected in Chronicles. At least we get the years of these kings that they're given, and there's a synchronization, as we know, between the kings of the north and the south. So there's obviously an attempt at some kind of a chronology in these passages. So there's different kinds of information in the Hebrew Bible, and later writers picked up on this. One of the more interesting Dead Sea Scrolls for calendar reasons is 4Q252, or Commentary on Genesis, which goes through the flood statements, giving time units, and adds more to them, telling us the day of the week and things like that. And in fact, being one of the few texts that expresses the idea that the year lasts 364 days. And it's pretty clear that that writer derived that, or at least related that to the story of the flood. That's where he got his idea, or the notion that the year lasted 364 days.
Thank you, Professor VanderKam.
I said I would stop, but let me.
Oh, go ahead.
Let me add one more note.
Sure.
By
all means.
in First Chronicles 24, we learn about the various priestly groups that rotated service at the temple every week. And this surprisingly became an important foundation for calendar calculation among the Qumran calendar writers, that this was a way to measure or designate a 7-day period by using the name of a priestly group and saying it was the week of whatever that priestly group, day 4 in it or something like that. So that was one way to talk about a week.
Well, just 2 comments here, because at the beginning of your book, you talk about, obviously, creation story, which is Genesis 1:1 through 2:4a, I think it is. And also then you go with the flood story and everything. But another big example of chronology, which is evident to me, at least as a reader, is the famous, as you said, 70 or how many weeks in Daniel 7 and Jeremiah, 70 weeks, right? So, but Professor, is this part of because I don't want to be imprecise here or inaccurate, but is this, to be blunt, is this just mere speculation from on behalf of these people waiting for some events, the coming of the Messiah, the end of any empire enemy to come to an end? Can we say, or is not that simple? There's more complexities to this.
Well, no, it's a good question. It's an important question, I think. But I think that the book of Daniel presents that whole matter as arising out of concern that it's been a long time that Jerusalem has been in a certain state, and where is God's promise in connection with that? If Jeremiah prophesied that Jerusalem would be desolate for 70 years, and past that time, and whoever was deciding whether Jerusalem was lying desolate had thought it still wasn't recovered the way it should be. I think pretty clearly the writer is concerned that the accuracy of this divine statement in the book of Jeremiah is being called into question, and he does not, and this writer, Daniel 9, is convinced that the divine revelation to Jeremiah is accurate. So he has to find a way to explain how that prophecy can still be accurate, even though it's clear that a longer time has passed than a literal 70 years. And you could say that this is just an arbitrary thing by this writer to say, let's multiply it by 70. Let's see what happens then. That sounds like fun.
Exactly.
But just to realize that he could find warrant for this in the book of Leviticus, about how God had predicted that he would conduct himself with his people, that if they persisted in their wickedness, and this is repeated there in Leviticus several times, that the punishment would be sevenfold. So that the writer of Daniel 9 really felt that this other passage was helping him understand the words of Jeremiah, and that they could still apply to his own day. And I think it's an indication that the writer of that chapter was, pretty obviously writing at a much later time than 70 years after Jeremiah gave that prophecy. I think it was a sincere effort by this person to deal with both the evidence in Jeremiah and his understanding that this wasn't just Jeremiah throwing out an opinion. This is what God induced him to say.
Yeah. I'd like to say also about the timing of Jeremiah's prophecy, because as we know, it says 70 years, but it only took 50 for some of them to come back.
Yes.
So the timing, are they giving themselves more time just in case it happens? This is a good question now that you mention it, because I always ask myself, it says 70 years is being dictated to your people that you'll be in exile, but they came back. And there's been a lot of ways to explain that around, like let's say, well, the first wave came, it was 50 years, but then the second bigger wave came afterwards, and that's when it was fulfilled. How talking about time, how would you what's your take on it, Professor VanderKam?
Well, as you probably know, there were different ideas about exactly at what point Jeremiah gave this prophecy. What are we to date it from? Which year? Certain year of King Nebuchadnezzar that it's dated from. But you could also ask exactly how it was going to be measured. How would we be able to tell that it was completed, that the prophecy was fulfilled or wasn't fulfilled? And I think we get the impression from some passages in the book of Zechariah, and maybe Ezra too, that this is, people are thinking about Jeremiah's prophecy, and that it's getting close to the time that he would, to the 70-year period from whenever we're to calculate Jeremiah's prophecy. And the fact that the temple was completed when it was really perhaps somewhat conditioned by wanting this prophecy to be fulfilled, whether it was in 518 or 516 or whatever the year we want to think of the completion of the temple. It could be lined up with Jeremiah's prophecy and seeing it as fulfilled.
Yeah, and also
Yes.
the end of the exile include the returns of all the tribes, which never happened during the restoration of Jerusalem.
Right. So we wouldn't have to conclude that this would refer only to the time from which Jerusalem was destroyed and then the first group of people came back. That is not what Jeremiah actually says. And as Matthias just said, that all the tribes never came back.
Okay, there's a comment here, Professor VanderKam. Wonderful to see Dr. VanderKam here. Yes, I agree with that. Okay, there's something I want to show you. Oh, Matthias, you were about to
do
say
a comment or a question or following comment. It's related to why is the flood so significant with respect to dates? You will think that the creation week in Genesis 1 will be the one that sets the dates, but it's the flood, the life of Noah, the duration of the flood, the one that accumulates dates. That's very unusual if you think about it. This is the first reference to a calendar in the whole Genesis narrative. And also I found a very interesting article that connects the flood with the Pleiades constellation. There was some rabbinic speculation about that the flood started when God removed 2 stars from the Pleiades, and then the flood stopped when God put those 2 stars back, like an off and on switch. And one of the author of the article said that it is possible that the reference to a calendar month on the date of the flood was made to connect the events with the Pleiades. So it seems that could have been an astronomical reason why the flood was used as a landmark, as a point in which dates were starting to be counted in the Bible.
Yeah. Well, I can't comment on that particular theory, but in a sense, the flood story is a strange place to look for or to expect calendar dates, since any means of measuring time during this kind of an event would have disappeared. Nobody's going to be seeing the sun or the moon. We're having 40 days of rain and everything is covered up. But I think simply the practical fact that this passage is so much fuller of dates than any other one practically in the Hebrew Bible is the reason why people find it so decisive for calendar calculations. Whatever the it's another question to ask, well, why would we have all these dates in the flood story? Do we really need them? So I guess we would have to ask the writers, the P&J writers, exactly why they did this. And maybe they had good reasons, I presume they did, but why they accumulated them here when the time really couldn't be measured, I don't know.
It's a very interesting question because it comes to the other topic about the dates of the lifespan of the patriarchs, which it seems it's almost certain, as at least on the literature that I have read, the dates, the lifespan of the patriarchs were symbolic and were connected to the date of the flood. So it seems there was some kind of very, very, very important meaning for the writers to accumulate dates in that event. But sadly, we don't have all the evidence. I'm doing my thesis related to astronomical objects, and it's possible that maybe there is a connection with the story of the Nephilim, because the Pleiades, the constellation of the Pleiades, is connected always in astrology and mythology with Orion, which is the hunter, which was also identifying as a giant in the ancient world.
Yeah,
so maybe
right.
there is another connection there.
Yeah. And you were mentioning the ages of the patriarchs. They are all calculated to get us to the year of the flood, that they're all dead by the time of the flood. So there's obviously planning there in these dates to get us to the year of the flood. But exactly why the lifespans are divided the way they are, other than that they usually seem to go down. Noah, of course, is an exception, and Methuselah, but can't figure out what the pattern would be there, given the evidence we have.
Yeah. Jovel, you were about to say something, or was just my
No,
impression? Okay.
your impression.
My impression. Okay, there's something I want to show you here. This is very interesting. So Professor VanderKam writes here on page 13, the earliest Jewish text offering systematic statements about calendars is the astronomical book of Enoc, found in chapter 7282 of 1 Enoc. It is of a special interest in this context, not only because of its extensive treatment of calendrical topics, but also because it brings us into the thought world that will later be represented in many of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Any comments on that, Professor VanderKam?
Yeah, I recognize that I wrote that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we could agree that we do not have what could really be called a calendar document in the Hebrew Bible, or the Greek Bible for that matter. So the first text that really qualifies as an extended treatment of astronomical or calendrical issues is the astronomical book of Enoch. And as we know, the original language of an Enoch astronomical work was Aramaic, and that we now have a number of copies of that work, very fragmentary copies of it, found in Cave 4 of Qumran. And the relationship between the Aramaic version of an Enoch book and the Ethiopic version that we now have, the Gez one, is something that has been debated extensively, because it seems like the major topic of the material from Qumran is not really represented in 1st Enoch 72 to 82, where we have more of a summary of larger topics. But whether the Aramaic fragments or the Ethiopic text, they all are centered around calendar subjects. And in that, the solar year of 364 days is mentioned a number of times in 1 Enoch 72 to 82. And also the length of 12 lunations or cycles of the moon as 354 days is also mentioned in them. I think that qualifies them as calendrical texts. And it's this kind of calculation that we find in the Dead Sea Scrolls as well, the same references to lengths of the solar year and the 12 lunations. So I think we can show that an astronomical book of Enoch was one that writers of scrolls consulted, writers of the Dead Sea Scrolls consulted, probably as an authoritative reference.
Thank you. Professor VanderKam, there is a question here coming from our audience on the comments. She says, Dr. VanderKam, are you aware of Michael, I don't know how to pronounce that last name, so please forgive me. I don't want to butcher it. Lefebvre. I think it's French. Are you aware of Michael Lefebvre's book, Liturgy of Creation, and how those dates in the flood correspond to the festival calendar of Israel?
I don't know that book. No, I do not. It is true that we have references to the 7th month and to the 1st month, which are, of course, important festival months. But I have not read that book.
Thank you. I know the book, but I haven't read it. So yeah, I know the reference. It was published by, I think it was IBP, if I'm not mistaken. So let's go back here. Another comment before we can go and follow with the questions here. Let's see. So the booklet, which is the Astronomical Book of Enoch, Professor VanderKam says, also offers us our first opportunity to observe the theological role. How about that? The calendars were thought to play in connection with God's orderly creation. Measuring units of time was not simply a matter of convenience. Look at that. Rather, it was a moral issue involving obedience to the divine revelation about the nature of reality and the laws by which the world operated. Professor VanderKam, moral issue. That was the level these people was really committed to the precision of the calendars and everything? Because I mean, there was a theological risk. That's what I'm understanding.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, I think it does get into a moral issue. If I understand correctly, the basic way of thinking by these people was that God had established laws for each part of his creation. He certainly had established laws for his people, and we find those, of course, in the Hebrew Bible, in Leviticus and Deuteronomy and so on. And if people were to live good lives, appropriate lives, the kinds of lives God wanted them to live, they would live according to his laws. And that's, of course, why he gave them those laws. They're laws that are meant to encourage people to live in the most proper way. One could flourish the most if one followed the laws of the God who had created us. Well, I think the same is the case for the creation. When God created the world, and this is a way in which the creation story plays, of course, into calendar matters. When God created the universe, he created it to act according to certain laws and not to deviate from those laws. And as it turns out, the sun and the moon and the stars don't deviate from the paths that God ordained for them. They obey God's laws. And we know that passage in First Enoch 2-5, talking about how nature, various parts of nature, obey the laws God prescribed for them, but people don't. People mess up.
Big time.
But nature operates according to his laws, so that if we're going to measure time properly, if we're going to do things at the right time, like celebrate festival of Sukkot in the right way and at the right time, we would have to have the right calendar, the one that God, by which God has ordered his creation and the movements of the heavenly bodies and so on. So in that sense, I think it is a moral issue. It's living according to the laws that God imposed when he made the universe. And that's why you have to follow the right calendar. It's not just a matter of saying, well, I have a calendar, you have yours, that's fine, let's both be happy. It doesn't work that way. Only one correct one.
Yeah. Okay. Matthias, Jovel, any comments, guys?
I want to just to mention that talking to a Latin American audience, which are mainly charismatic Pentecostals, the only calendar they know is either Christmas, sometimes Easter, which many of them see the pagan, or the most important part of their year would be the date where their church was founded. So within the Latin American, most of Latin American concept of time is so different, so foreign. Like those people who follow a lectionary, let's say, that you have to do certain readings at a certain time. Let's say I'm a Baptist, but I follow the lectionary. So this Sunday I'll be preaching on Isaiah 35. So this would be a very foreign. Just to let you know, and just as a general observation, it's a very different way of looking at time to our audience.
Yeah.
So it will be a challenge.
Yeah, I can understand that. That would be the attitude, and I know what you mean about certain Christians. For certain Christians, it's just Christmas and Easter that are the markers of the major events of the year, or Halloween, a non-festival like that. But I think the way of thinking that we find expressed in the Dead Sea Scrolls attaches a great deal more importance to proper dates than maybe many of us are accustomed to in modern times.
Okay, I just wanna, because I skipped something here. Oh, this one. So for the audience, that's the Professor VanderKam. That's the GS, right?
Yep.
Let me put it right here. Back. There you go. Okay, there you go. Okay, so I just want to read the quote. In Enoc 7282 may serve as a bridge between the evidence available before the Qumran discoveries and the Dead Sea Scrolls themselves, in that an Ethiopic translation of the work had been accessible for more than a century before 1947. But fragments of the original Aramaic version of the book were subsequently identified amid the myriad scraps from Cave 4. Okay, that's good. So what I understand is that it didn't exist any more evidence, just the Ethiopian version.
Yeah. Well, if the copies of the Ethiopic Book of Enoch became available in the West in the 1770s, I think it was, and so a few people were able to access them then, and then the first English translation was made in the early 19th century. So people had that information available, and that in many ways is a nice summary of what we in Aramaic fragments. But as I mentioned earlier, it certainly doesn't focus as the Aramaic fragments we have do.
Yeah.
Focus on lunar movements and illumination of the lunar surface and so on.
Thank you. So following the questions here, Professor VanderKam, what kind of differences, if any, do stand out among Jubilees, Enoc, and calendarical texts from the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Okay, let's do it in the order first Enoch, then Jubilees,
Mm.
then the calendar text from Qumran. In first Enoch, 72 to 82, as we've seen, we have the 364-day year and the 354 days for 12 lunations. So that book, even in the Ethiopic form, we get that basic information supplied to us that will be so important for people later on. What we do not have in the book of Enoch is any talk about what this has to do with the festivals. First Enoch 72 to 82 doesn't mention festivals. It doesn't say Passover is the first month, the 14th day, or anything of that sort. So we don't have that kind of information. When we get to the book of Jubilees, there's a somewhat different picture. Jubilees makes it obvious in several places that the sun is the important celestial orb for calculating time. And it makes this explicit even in its creation story in chapter 2, where it's reflecting Genesis 1, but assigns the measurement of time just to the sun, not to the moon. Assigns it to the great light in the sky, to the sun. Whereas Genesis gives a different impression. It's the sun and the moon that do both, and the stars do these sorts of things. And in Jubilees chapter 6, when it's talking about the year of 364 days, it has some statements in it that to the effect that those people who make observations of the moon, which would have been most people who cared about dating things back then, that they ruin the proper, they don't realize what is the proper length of the year, because from the moon they calculate that the year lasts 354 days. 12 lunations do that. It's kind of funny to talk about a lunar year, but that's what they do in this kind of context. And it sounds from Jubilees as if it's a big mistake to use the moon for calculating time. Now, it sounds, therefore, as though Jubilees is disagreeing with the teachings of the Enoch astronomical work, which talks about both sun and moon as giving us, helpful information, correct information about the lengths, about two different lengths of time, 364 days, 354 days. I've wondered, though, it's not overly clear from the book of Jubilees, but I've wondered if the writer isn't really saying that you have to follow the solar or the 364-day year to date the festivals. Jubilees brings the festivals in connection with the calendar, and it dates, a number of them, like Passover, like Tabernacles, Festival of Weeks especially, and unleavened bread, but the Day of Atonement. Jubilees insists that it always dates these festivals according to the 364-day system. It never does so in terms of what date in a lunation these events would fall in. So I've wondered if that's what the author meant, that you're not supposed to date the festivals according to lunar calculations. You have to use the 364-day year to do that. And that's the only way in which you'll celebrate them at the times that God designated for them when he set up the world and the passage of time and so on. But when we get to the Dead Sea Scrolls and the explicitly calendar texts there, like from 4Q 319 or 317 actually till about 330, In these texts, we again have a situation that looks more like the book of Enoch, where in these Qumran texts, much attention is paid to the sequence of from new moon to full moon and back to the disappearance of the lunar disk. That's a very important topic in texts from Qumran, just as the 364-day year is. But I think that it's, as far as dating festivals, I think this is accurate. The Qumran texts do that according to the 364-day year, just as Jubilees does. It just shows more interest, more positive interest in the illumination of the lunar surface and so on, the patterns of it, than Jubilees does. So we do find different emphases in these texts as we move along. But I suspect that the author of Jubilees could be friends with whoever wrote the Enoch astronomical.
That might be.
I think they could.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be friends with Ben Sira,
No,
because Ben Sira put all the emphasis in the moon. It's like the other extreme.
Yeah.
Ben Sira, as you quote Ben Sira in your book, basically he puts all the emphasis in the moon, as it's the moon that marks the changing of the seasons, governing the times, while the sun is just put as one creation of God, but it's not connected in any way to the dates and the calendar. So it could be the two extremes.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay. All right.
It is interesting. I think we have that evidence from Ben Sira, but we really have very little information about what was happening in the temple in Jerusalem, let's say in the 2nd century BC or 1st century. But I think most people assume that it was some sort of lunisolar arrangement according to which the festivals were dated. We really don't have a lot of evidence to go on to make that point.
Yeah, so there was an agreement between Qumran and the temple about the dates of the festival, but they didn't use the same calendar. That was the problem.
Yeah,
it's very very interesting how probably Ben Sira it's focused more on the moon, because Ben Sira is way more focused on how to say it. It doesn't deny the supernatural, because it makes reference to supernatural events, but actually don't play it a lot in Ben Sira.
Yeah.
So it's basically said, unless you're a prophet, don't worry about your dreams. If you dream something, it's nothing.
Yeah.
But since more lunar calendars are easier to make, because it's easier to observe the cycles of the moon, it's probably a more it will require less speculation and probably less mysticism in the whole process to get dates. So that could be a reason.
Yeah.
I guess the third question actually jives with your comment, Matthias. Let's show it on the screen for Professor Scholars. So, Professor VanderKam, in your work, you show that the Qumran community used the 364-day calendar for liturgical precision and also employed prophetic chronologies like the weeks of years from Daniel. I've heard that other scholars that the Qumran community had some timeline expectation for the coming of the Messiah. Is that accurate? Were other eschatological expectations related to the calendar?
Yeah, well, and here we're talking about calendar in the sense of measuring longer units of time. We do have texts like the animal apocalypse of Enoch, where there are some attempts to offer segmentation of time Although more interesting is, I think, the Apocalypse of Weeks, which organizes the whole of scriptural history into weeks, and obviously using the term in a larger sense than 7 days or 7 years. It's obviously a long period of time, and I think we don't know exactly how long a period of time a week was according to this author, but he talks about 10 of them, and the last ones are the times of the judgment. So he obviously has some sort of chronology of that will go into the future and to the time of the judgment and what the state of things will be at the end of that. But it's pretty hard for us to see exactly what the dates he had in mind were. And we've already talked about the book of Daniel, chapter 9, where this writer clearly has a chronology in mind, his 7 times 70 years, and he divides that into segments and clearly talks about some special events happening toward the end of that. So I wouldn't be surprised that there were attempts to try to calculate when that end time would come, using these kinds of patterns that could be discerned in the Hebrew scriptures. But all of them seem to have had some sort of flexibility connected with them. Nobody comes right out and says, okay, it's going to be in the 37th year of some 70-year period off in the future. That there's nothing that precise, I think, in these attempts to calculate when that future time would come.
All I am part of what I'm understanding here during this talk from Professor VanderKam is that human impulse to know the future, to know what will be of us, in the coming days, is not something new.
No.
Even the ancients, they were like, they were keen to get a glimpse what's coming to us, what's the future ahead of us.
Right.
We want to know, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling this for some. I'm not gonna, let the cat off the bag, but just like some denominational groups in their history, they've been trying out over and over again to try to, discern the times. What's gonna happen when Jesus is returning? When is the end of the world and everything?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something new. Ancient people, in their own way, using their own methods and everything, they've been doing it, and they left for us some material, evidence that we can, through the experts like Professor VanderKam and many others, we can have a look of what they thought and the way they thought about these things.
Yeah.
Professor VanderKam, there's another question here following the discussion, and it has to do with the zodiac. It goes like this.
Can I make a little comment?
Sure.
Before, so
Yeah.
with respect to the timeline for the Messiah, could be that since we have a timeline of weeks in Daniel, but and the week is the weeks of Daniel, maybe the Qumran community thought that it couldn't be that it was related to events during Antiochus for Epiphanies. Should be something in the future, and could be that therefore they adjusted the timeline in such a way they will be in the near future. That's probably related also with the war scroll and another apocalyptical expectations of that.
When you look at the Pesher on Habakkuk, that there's obviously concern with the time seeming long, but it's still you're supposed to wait and hope and so on for it. And I think that the community that we see reflected in some of the Dead Sea Scrolls was constantly searching the scriptures for this kind of information or hints about this sort of thing. Was there information hidden in that text that would allow us to calculate such things? And obviously having an inspired teacher or reader of the scriptures like the teacher of righteousness would give you your best opportunity to find such information in the scriptures. But even a text like that, which assumes that the prophecy of Habakkuk is revelation, and assumes that the teacher of righteousness is an inspired interpreter of it, even text, the Habakkuk passage, which encourages one to wait and to be faithful and diligent and so on while one waits, because the wonders of God are beyond human capacity to understand. So they make possibilities for being wrong, realizing the time may be longer than they had hoped or expected.
Now, I just wanted to say something regarding calendar and time as well, because I know that there's also this fixation in certain parts in the USA regarding the time that the Messiah will come, mainly from Messianic Jews or also I'd like to say Messianic comes, but but mainly in Latin America, there's always this fixation about that the festival of trumpets, regarding the coming back of Jesus. And this is I'm thinking of a Mexican, specifically a Mexican person that he's very well known in Latin America, and he has done it twice. I mean, saying that the Lord will come in during trumpets. And would this be also reflected in the calendar from the Dead Sea Scrolls community, Professor VanderKam?
That these kinds of things accompanying.
Yes.
That,
yes, accompanying.
I don't know of that. We Matthias was mentioning the War Scroll, and it talks about certain conditions, but it doesn't. Yeah, it's lots of trumpets in it, but not really this kind of arrival of the Messiah.
No pun intended.
Yeah. So I don't know of anything that would match that sort of thing in the Dead Sea Scrolls. But obviously a messianic anticipation, but I think a realization that they didn't quite have it figured out yet when this is going to happen. But they realized too that they were living in really bad times, which is what was going to be the case when the Messiah came. When the Messiah came.
This particular individual has even created some panic. I mean, he's from Mexico, and he has a very wide audience, and he has access to the how can I say, this is a channel in Latin America, a Christian channel that has reached to whole of Latin America. So when he said that the Lord is coming in trumpets, so everybody got scared. I believe even Matthias, when he was in Russia, I mean,
I need to say this. I need to say this because we just don't want to drift away from this topic.
That's a fun one, though.
I know. That's why I want to say this. I want to get it off my chest. The end times business is highly profitable. Many people, they can get a lot of money by just talking about this stuff in a very sensational way.
Yeah.
Many people, with social media and everything, they go on and plug some channel or whatever, or podcast or whatever. And I mean, just take the example of this guy. What's his name? Hensey. What was the name? Little Hensey.
Lindsay.
This guy sold. I'm not sure, over 1 million copies.
Yeah, well,
it was what? I'm not kidding you. seriously
Yeah.
a lot of money by talking about the end of the world, the Left Behind novels and everything, because that the end time business is highly profitable. And some people, yeah, there's another name here. Yeah. So some people, they have noticed the money is there, so we just need to go there, guys.
Yeah, but
What's the worst thing
yeah.
of all is that people buy into all this
I know.
this talk.
Well,
That's
there's also Marv is also Professor VanderKam. Marv is also becoming rich from interviewing people as you.
trust me, this is pure passion and fun, and really appreciate not only Professor VanderKam but many others, John J. Collins, Florentino Garcia Martinez, Lawrence Schiffman. They come here and they talked about this stuff. AJ Levine, who we with Luis Joel, we were before in that interview, and Marcus B. Bretler. No, we do this just for passion, and we love
Yes,
it.
passion.
Yeah, and we don't get a, trust me, we don't get a dime from this. At least not myself.
We
Yeah.
get a lot of criticism though for inviting people such as you, but
Yeah, but I don't care.
we don't care. We don't care.
Well, can you imagine what it was like for those people, like in the United States in the 19th century, who predicted the exact date? When
Wow.
Jesus would return, and they were obviously proved wrong. It must have been taken some careful explanation afterwards to say, well, I guess I was wrong about this verse or whatever. They somehow survived. And
before continuing with the questions, Professor VanderKam, I just want to send a commercial here, and this is for a book. Professor VanderKam, he, along with George Nicholsburg, another big guy in Second Temperance Judaism studies, they both wrote the best. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this is the best translation of one Enoch. That's what I've been told from an academic perspective. And also Professor VanderKam, he has written the Jubilees translation, the Hermenea translation. This is the top-notch, guys. So if you don't want to get flunky translations or everything, you need to get those translations right there. Okay, let's move on here with the question. Where was I? Okay, here we go. So, Professor VanderKam, how do you understand the ontological status of the gates? This is getting good. Of the gates in the heavens, in the thought of the Qumran community. Were they perceived as actual portals in the firmament, as symbolic divisions of time, or perhaps as part of a kind of celestial temple blueprint that mirrored the earthly liturgy, or were they the 12 constellations of the zodiac? Please take a breath. Take a breath, Professor VanderKam, then you can go again.
That's my question, by the way.
Oh, well, what a surprise. Okay. Well, I think they.
That's something to the mix now.
Yeah, I think the writer of the Enoc materials thought that these were actual segments along the horizon, along the eastern and the western skies, and they were areas through which they could watch the stars move and the sun and the moon and so on. But I think they were really there as they looked out toward the horizon, that these were segments there. I don't think they were a reflection of a celestial temple, with gates and things like that. Although I guess that's not impossible, but I don't think that's the way the writer of the astronomical book of Enoch talked about it. And that's, of course, what is reflected in the Dead Sea Scrolls calendar text. We have some texts that are more astrological in nature from the scrolls, and talking about where one is born, the particular location of heavenly bodies when one is born, and how much of it is in a certain area of the horizon, how much of on a particular date, and so on. and whether that explains physical characteristics. It just seems to me that all of this kind of information really fits best with the idea that they understood the 6 gates in the east and the 6 in the west to be just a convenient division of the horizon that allowed them to take note of when celestial bodies were in a certain place and draw whatever consequences from that, maybe for the character of people born at certain times and so on. So let me just say that I know that there's been a disagreement about whether in some way the gates correspond with the signs of the zodiac. Neugebauer did not think so. Of course, he was a great expert in the astrology and astronomy found in cuneiform texts, and he wrote about the Enoc astronomy as well. He didn't think they could be the signs of the zodiac, but I think there's been some disagreement about that in more recent times.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
So if the doors could be the divisions of time, it means that there could be a departure from the standard Old Testament cosmology. For example, in Old Testament cosmology, you have the doors in the firmament from which the rain comes, and that were open during the flood event. So maybe Enoch has a different cosmology than the authors of the Old Testament.
Yeah. Well, I think that the gates cosmology that we have in the Enoch literature is different than the idea of the windows. Enoch also talks about windows in the gates and so on. But I think the windows through which the waters descend in the flood, that's a different thing, a different concept than what we find in the Enochic gates.
I have once, I still have to test the hypothesis, but I had once an idea if I could actually find the physical windows in the horizon if I using astronomical software to see if the sun comes out between mountains in the Qumran region. I still have to check the theory, the hypothesis, sorry, but maybe, I don't know. That would be too specific, though, but
mind you, Matthias is an astronomer, so he's into this.
That's
I'm gonna give you some background information.
That's why he's keenly interested on those matters, Professor VanderKam. Now you know it. Okay, so let's move on here.
I just want to just make a cultural references. I don't know, Professor VanderKam, if you remember a movie. This is a bit dated movie now. It's called Stargate. So
Stargate.
So yes, no Stargate. Remember? So in this
that was a series though.
Yeah, it was a series as well. Movies and series. So they had this idea that they were Stargates where they could found in Egypt, and they could it's a round thing. You could go in there. It's like a wormhole. That's the sort of thing. I mean, this is 21st century or 20th and 21st century thinking. But when in my mind, when they talk about portals, I think most people would refer to the series or refer to that thinking. I really recommend you to have a look at Stargate. That's the name with Russell Crowe. No, not Russell Crowe. This other he used
the
to
one
be
who did Macbeth. Macbeth. I forgot. The one who used to do inventions.
Yes, but this is many people pick on that movie so they can and maybe understand why people are so much into this, because like I said, the series was a very long series. They had a lot of seasons, so this has been ingrained in people's minds.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on, people. We want to value Professor VanderKam's
time. My question.
Yes. So, Qumran calendar. Professor VanderKam, how did the timing impact the theology and practice of the community, and why they felt that by following the wrong calendar, the temple leaders were in the wrong. Da 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 da.
Well, I think we've talked about some aspects of this question already.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I mentioned that this is the way God created the universe and set the stars and the sun and the moon in certain courses that took certain amounts of time to do their revolutions. That the calendar again wasn't an arbitrary thing. It wasn't something you borrowed from another culture or something that you took from somebody who was really good at looking at the stars or looking at the moon. It was something that God had created, and therefore it was not an arbitrary thing. It wasn't something you could say, okay, I'll follow that one or I won't follow that one, because you would be wrong if you didn't follow it. Who would know better? Who would know better than God, the Creator, about what He set up the universe to be like? So, apparently, the calendar in the temple, we could infer, involved using the lunar calculations. At least we know that from later times. And this was the calendar that other nations in the area of Israel used, as we know. So they were being like the nations in a way, and they weren't really following God's revelation. I mean, you could read the flood story as is done in the commentary on Genesis 4Q 252 and realize that God had revealed right there in Genesis 6 through 9 what was the length of the year. Just had to read the text correctly. So if like with the author of Jubilees, the 364-day system is the one by which you dated festivals, and in the temple they were not following that system, then there was something ontologically wrong with the timing of festivals. It was just bad, and you could not accept that sort of thing. You were defying God by celebrating festivals according to a lunisolar calendar.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Robert, you were about to say something?
No. It's
Okay.
I mean, that's how they would disqualify the temple people as maybe their sacrifice and also their festivals not being how can I say God ordained.
Yes.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right. Absolutely. Right. It would affect not just festivals, but the festivals had their sacrifices connected with them. And
It's even Yom Kippur. You're not truly forgiven because you didn't do it on the right time.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah, well, yes. It was serious. It was serious. It was serious business.
No, that's why I took that excerpt from his book about the moral issue and being connection with and synchronized with God's orderly creation. So,
Yeah.
and I was like, is that big of a deal? Yes, it was for them. Maybe not for us because we're in different time, different mindsets and everything, but they took it very seriously.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, why would you go out in the desert just fighting over a calendar thing? Yeah, to us it sounds ridiculous, maybe stupid, but for us it was a big deal. It was
Yeah.
serious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Okay,
think
Professor, go ahead.
I think that's really at the base of the concept of righteousness. To be righteous, to act righteously, means to act in accordance with the laws that God has ordained for everything. For everything that for the operation of the universe, but also for the operation of people. How do people act? If you act according to the laws God has imposed in the different areas, then that's righteous.
Okay. Professor VanderKam, maybe this is to bury in the questions here, but in your book, you talk about some Elephantine papyri. Does that contribute? What kind of information does that contribute to the whole topic of calendars? Do we have information, calendar information in those papyri, or there is something even more about that?
Well, the Elephantine papyri again are not meant to be calendar texts. We do have some calendar related subjects that are mentioned in them, like the text. It's pretty well known text. It's usually called the Passover papyrus, but it doesn't actually mention Passover. It mentions the festival that follows it, the 7-day festival that follows it. But the texts are dated. The ones that are letters or documents of that sort that are dated, and we find that the month names and so on, and the dates.
Babylonian names.
Find out that kind of information from them. So apparently these people use whatever calendar was available at the time in their dealings with people in Egypt. I don't think, well, there isn't evidence in it in these texts for anything like a 364-day calendar.
Okay. All right, let's move on here now with the final question, and this is another. It's Matias. So this is the last question. Thank you for your patience, Professor VanderKam. We really appreciate it. So it goes like this. You note that the current 364-day calendar drifts about 1.25 days per year from the true solar year. Do you think that this eschatological passage at the end of the book of the luminaries, 1 Enoc 80, chapter 80, 6 through 7, on which the stars will stray from their course, was an eschatological interpretation of the discrepancy between the divinely revealed calendar and what they observed in the heavens?
Yeah. Good question. In my commentary on this part of the book of Enoch, I argued that passage doesn't belong to the earlier text of the Enoch astronomical book. And my reason for saying that is that it seems to me it contradicts what is said in 1 Enoch 72 about the movements of the heavenly bodies, and this is the way they'll move forever without change. And this talks about their changing apparently in the days of the sinners, however all of that works out. But I think if you ask the question, which I think is what is being asked here, is what the purpose of this unit in the astronomical section, why was it put there? It does sound as if it's written by somebody who's quite aware that the 364-day system didn't quite correspond with an annual revolution, or the Earth around the sun, and was trying to account for that and say, okay, things are going to change actually because of the sinfulness that was present on the Earth. So one way of trying to account for how a calculation didn't work out, just as when people who've tried to predict when the Messiah is to come or when the end is to come have to try to figure out a reason to explain why that happened. But I think it suggests, therefore, that it's a subsequent reflection on what is being claimed in the Enoch astronomical text, realizing that it didn't really work out. It must have taken some time, at least, for people to be aware, if they really did follow this 364-day calendar, that it didn't quite work. That soon the festivals would be in the wrong seasons and so on. So some explanation had to be found for that. I don't know, Matthias, do you have things to say about that?
You robbed me. I was going to say to Matthias, any comments?
Yes, because that passage connects the end of the book of the Watchers with the end of the book of the Luminaries, as you put in your comment. It's a textual connection between the two passages.
Yeah.
Because the scene of the stars that will air in their courses. It's exactly the same phrase used about the 7 stars that were like big mountains change, and that Enoch saw when he was guided by Uriel the angel. So it's basically it's at the end of the book of the luminaries. It talks about a prophecy. This is going to happen in the future, but it used the same phrase using the end of the book of the Washers about something that happened before the flood, the punishment of the rebel stars. So it seems that could be two. My personal hypothesis could be related to the fact that they didn't thought that they didn't think that the books, the weeks of Daniel were actually predicting something in Antiochus for Epiphanes, and since they thought that human sin affected the cosmos, the stars, and vice versa, and that's actually coming that you could take it from Deuteronomy, like in Deuteronomy 4 or 19. Sorry, don't look at the sun, moon, or star, or you will feel tempted to worship them, etc. So, since they thought that human sin could actually affect the cosmos and vice versa, they thought that this age is so depraved, no one is following the true God except us, obviously. That's why the calendar doesn't work.
Yeah.
If they were righteous or perfect, revealed calendar will work. But since the stars don't move as they should according to our revealed calendar, it means that they are sinners, and it means the end is near. That's
Yeah. That's good. I think that's right.
Okay. Abel, any comments? Final comments.
No, that's fine because Matthias is he is an expert in his own field, so better not comment.
Well, we just want to say thank you to Professor James VanderKam coming here to the podcast channel to talk about this very important, subject matters. We will still have some questions left. we're gonna die, and we have more and more questions and answer questions. And I'm quite sure that happens to scholars. They study and study, do research again and again, and the more they do research, the more questions come up to surface, right?
That's for sure. That's why it's so enjoyable to hear what other people have to say.
Exactly. So here, Carrie from Genesis Mark, this podcast, great conversation. Thanks to Dr. VanderKam. Yeah. So Professor VanderKam go ahead.
I hear this in podcasts, in all podcasts that they always ask. So, what's the future now, Professor VanderKam? I mean, are you working on a book, or what's your next project, or you have totally embraced retirement?
What's in the
pipeline? I published a book that came out a year or two ago. It's a biography of R.H. Charles.
Yeah, I know about that. Yeah.
And since that, I've been working on a book on the temple that was built after the exile, the temple built by Zerubbabel and Joshua, the one that lasted until the time of King Herod, and what is said about this temple in all of our sources. What did the building look like? What functions did it serve? What were people's evaluations of it? Because often one reads that this temple was not very impressive compared to Solomon's temple. But I don't think that that's what emerges from our sources about it. But at any rate, I pulled together all the information I could find about that temple, and
interesting.
Pretty much finished that project. So we'll see.
So maybe next time we can have a conversation not only on that, but also on your book on R.H. Charles. Yeah. He's a big guy.
That would be fun.
Enormous work on pseudepigrapha.
Yeah.
It came out with Oxford or Cambridge?
Yes, Oxford. Yeah.
Oxford, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I'll be looking
Okay,
forward
guys.
the temple book. That really
Yeah.
interests me, because at the time, remember during the after when they came back from the exile, there were some other temples around competing temples.
Yeah.
So and it's our understanding that only Jerusalem, no, Jews had other temples in Egypt. And
Right. That's right.
Yeah, they did.
Mhm.
They
Yes.
did indeed. Yeah.
And also the second temple when it was built, none of the images that are presented during the inauguration of the first temple were present. No
Yeah.
divine glory, no cloud from
Mm.
heaven. So that's a funny scene in Esdras and Nehemiah, in which the young people are happy that the temple is being rebuilt, and the old people are crying because it's not the same. So
Yeah. Well, I kind of wonder what they're crying about.
Yes.
yeah, that's a good question.
I think that could be read in a positive sense, actually. You know, sometimes we cry because we're happy.
Yeah.
I wondered if the implication is that they had never expected to see another temple in their lifetimes, and they were so happy about that. That's just a thought.
Mm.
I don't know.
Could be.
Could be,
Also
yeah.
could be. Mhm.
Why not? Not all tears are the product of sorrow. There are also tears of joyfulness and everything. So with that in mind, I think that's a good quote to end on here this episode. Thank you again, Professor VanderKam. It's an enormous pleasure always to have you on.
Well,
Hope we
thank you.
can have you sooner here on the podcast.
Yes.
With theologian Luis Jobel from Australia, and also future theologian and astronomer by now, Matthias from Russia. We thank you, everybody, in the comments. Thank you for being here. Thank you for dropping your comments. Thank you for also stopping by. You can check future interviews. There are coming pretty good topics in there. So please go ahead and give a like, subscribe, comment, support our work. We do this because we love that. It's our passion, and we want to continue with that. And with that, we come to an end. So everybody, bye now. Until the next time.
Thank you.
Bye bye.